So we've just got a couple of sentences in the Heart Sutra to cover, and then after that we can give a little bit of advice about what to do with all of these instructions. So we've just completed Avalokiteshvara's reply to Shariputra in terms of how to practice this wisdom of emptiness. And so right at the end of his answer he says, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. And then the next paragraph it says, then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. So then at the end, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, Buddha of course, is now commenting on Avalokiteshvara's answer to Shariputra and saying it's well said, son of the lineage. So here he's calling Avalokiteshvara son of the lineage. So again, Avalokiteshvara is appearing as a high-level bodhisattva, someone who's awakened his Mahayana lineage and is progressing towards enlightenment. And he's saying it is like that. So he's agreeing with what Avalokiteshvara said. And then we have the last paragraph, which says, the Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety along with the world of gods, humans, asuras and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Well, just one comment from the previous point. It said, even the Tathagatas rejoice. So Tathagata, here the word gata is the same root as in the mantra. Gate means go. So a Tathagata, Tatata is another word for emptiness. And so a Tathagata is someone who's gone to emptiness, meaning someone who's fully developed and realized emptiness. And then in the last paragraph, it said here that that everyone was inspired and praised what was explained here in this teaching. It said including the world of God. So here the word God is a translation of this Deva realm. So we looked in that wheel of life and we saw those Asuras and Devas. They're two types of beings in samsara. And so that's what this word God here is a translation of, is this Deva realm, and then human, and then we see the word Asura. So that's the other, those two realms that were close together in that chart. Gandharvas also is another type of being belonging to one of those realms of existence as well. I think Gandharvas sometimes come within the Preta realm, but also I think they can be in one of the other realms as well. And it said they were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. So it seems like there were these other types of beings present, not just simply a large group of monks and bodhisattvas. And so that is then the end of the Heart Sutra. So what I'd like to do now for the time remaining is talk a little bit about what we can do with the teaching that was given here in the Heart Sutra. So some sort of maybe some advice about that. And then maybe some chance for some last questions that you may have about any of the material we've covered in the last 2 days. So one thing is, I said right at the beginning, I think, that there are 3 stages in our practice. There's the go, nyan, talk. Intellectual, experience, realization. So we don't want to do what I did actually when I first came to Buddhism and received some teachings. I think it was just an introduction course. Lots of good ideas I had heard in the course. I thought, this is very good. So I took this with me home and I sort of arranged these ideas nicely on the shelf at home. I thought, oh, that's really nice stuff. And sort of that's where they stayed. They just sort of remained as some nice memories and good ideas, and then sort of nothing changed in my life, of course. So therefore, we need to avoid this expectation that somehow gathering some new knowledge will automatically transform our life. It won't. In fact, it can even have the opposite effect, because if we have that expectation, then, and it doesn't somehow magically transform our life, we maybe even become more miserable, because we think we've found the answer, but my life is no better. And so we even become more depressed. So if we want any of these ideas to benefit us in our life, we have to go through those stages. Go, Nyam, Tok. We have to bring intellectual understanding into experience through meditation, to transform our mind, to transform our habits. So we need to, not only, of course, to do that, practice has two parts, always has two parts. Meditation, where we're internalizing these ideas, bringing them into experience, and then, of course, integrating them into our daily life. You know, often I hear Buddhists talking among themselves, and one will say to the other, oh, when do you do your practice? And the other one will say, oh, I do it every morning at 6:30 for half an hour or 45 minutes. I think if this is our idea of practice, we're not going to get anywhere. Because if we just meditate even every day, but if we jump up from meditation and run around like crazy like the rest of the day like we normally do, then what little benefit we get in the morning from 30 minutes of meditation versus 14 hours of mindlessly running around reacting to things, which one's going to win out? I think the 14 hours might. So therefore, if we want to make some progress, yes, of course, daily meditation is very important to internalize, but then we need to bring that into the day. So we need to then integrate whatever we do in our daily life. And so here, of course, in this topic of emptiness that we've been covering, then the meditation practice, of course, would be to investigate, in particular initially, how I exist, and to come to see and taste that, well, there's no me to be found here, and rest in that experience of emptiness, allowing that to penetrate deeper into our mind. And this, in emptiness practice, is called space-like emptiness. So we have emptiness practice is space-like emptiness or illusory-like emptiness. So space-like is talking about meditation. Because in that meditation we're searching, we're looking for this me that seems to be here. And if we don't find it, that not finding is a space-like experience. So we hold that, allow it to penetrate our mind. Then if we want to, then we need to continue this emptiness practice in daily life. And that is called illusory-like emptiness practice. And that is to see everything as like an illusion. Meaning we are to question appearances in our daily life, particularly in situations that are pleasant and unpleasant, because generally they cause a reaction of attachment, aversion. So when we are faced with these situations in our life, we can use our understanding and experience of emptiness in meditation to question these appearances. And if, for example, if we have a pleasant experience, we can, that object or person seems to be very attractive from its own side, we can look, where is the beauty and attractiveness in that personal thing? Can we find it there somewhere? Or if we have an unpleasant experience, can we find the unattractive quality there in that personal thing? And if we do that, then there will be no basis for attachment aversion to arise, because we won't be able to find the beauty or ugliness in the object itself. And every time we do that, of course, that is deepening our appreciation and understanding of emptiness. And so not only will it have a positive impact in our daily life in reducing our attachment and aversion, but that will feed back into the emptiness meditation. So they'll work together to go deeper. And so, of course, here in the spiritual path, we're talking about transforming our mind. Through here in particular, mainly talking about transforming our mind through the wisdom practice, coming to realize emptiness, to overcome ignorance and mental afflictions. So, of course, we're talking about an inner transformation. Unfortunately, what often happens when people come into Buddhism and do a few courses and so forth, then they go, oh, I like this stuff, I'm a Buddhist now. And then they go home and they make a big show about that. I'm a Buddhist. And often, if they've been in India, then they often come home with a shaved head and wearing this funky Buddhist clothing and this Buddhist jewelry and everything, and sort of walk around and saying, you know, I'm a Buddhist now. So this is a sure sign that our spiritual practice has been hijacked by the ego. And now all we've done is we've become a spiritual ego. And spiritual ego is one of the worst types of ego, because spiritual ego has this sense of superiority. You know, I'm spiritual now. Are you? No. I'm better than you. So we do not want our ego to hijack our spiritual practice. Also, of course, if we make a big outward display of it, we're going to attract a lot of unwelcome attention, particularly if we go back to a more conservative community or family. I think we're going to maybe face a lot of problems. Particularly, I think, if we go back to a community or family which is ultra-conservative, and you really feel that you are Buddhist or really want to follow the Buddhist way, I would recommend not even telling them that. Really, seriously. If they're super ultra-conservative and they ask, what are you doing? You just say, well, I'm just trying to be a better person. I'm trying to be more kind and compassionate. I think that, and more wise. I don't think anyone can argue with that. But if we start saying, well, I'm really a Buddhist now, I think we're going to face a lot of unnecessary difficulties in our life. And of course, if we really want to have this inner transformation happening, we need help. I think as a beginner, it's almost impossible to do this on our own. And I know from personal experience. I did a couple of Buddhist courses, full of enthusiasm, went back to Australia, wanted to transform my life. But basically, for 2 years, nothing happened. I wanted to meditate every day, I wanted to change my life. Nothing happened. Because where I went back to, there was no one else interested in this. I was on my own. I just got swept up in my old habits and routines. No matter how much I wanted to change, I couldn't do it. So for 2 years, nothing changed. It was only when I found myself then, after 2 years, in an environment that was supportive that I managed to start to manage to do something. So of course, this is the idea of Sangha, or spiritual community. We saw at the beginning of the Heart Sutra, there was a great community of monks and bodhisattvas, a Sangha. So I think if we really want to do something like this in our life, we need help, particularly as a beginner, because we have very strong habits and routines, and we're very easily influenced by the things around us. We need help. So it's very important, if not essential, to find other like-minded people, get connected with them, meet together regularly. You get support from them, you support them as well. And I think on top of that, then it's very helpful to every so often, maybe once or twice a year, to attend a little group retreat to give yourself a boost. This, of course, was very short, 2 days, but next year, actually starting next year, I think each year, beginning in March, I think, I'll be leading a 10-day retreat. So this would be an excellent opportunity. I'm not trying to promote it, but this would be an excellent opportunity to give yourself a boost. Yeah, here in Israel. And I would really recommend to start with group retreat, because sometimes people understand the benefit of retreat, but they try to do solitary retreat. As a beginner, very difficult, even if you're only going to do 1 or 2 days, because you have to be self-disciplined, self-motivating, very difficult. Whereas if it's a group retreat, it's all organized, there's structure, someone's guiding, all you got to do is turn up and follow the sessions. And also you get a lot of group energy to help you go through. So very much recommend to start with group retreat. And then once you have some experience with this, then of course it's good to start to do a little bit of solitary retreat, 1 or 2 days or so at regular intervals. That will give you very much a boost. Of course, part of that is we need to simplify our life. Often people want to meditate, but often we hear people say, oh, I'd love to meditate, but I don't have time to meditate. I think that's never a valid excuse. Of course, it's true, most of us have super busy lives. And on top of what we do now, probably it's going to be difficult to add meditation. But actually, if we look at our life, of course, some of the things in our life are essential. Most of us probably need to work a certain amount to earn enough money to have a roof over our head and food in our stomach. Maybe some of us have got family responsibilities. Maybe some of us have got other responsibilities. But above and beyond those essential responsibilities, we tend to fill up our day with lots of stuff. And often we do that for one of 2 reasons. One reason is that it's often said that, or thought that in the modern society, if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. So we've got to do something, just do anything to be productive. So we just do. And of course, also, if we're not doing something, and we're just sitting quietly there, not doing anything, it really forces us to look at our mind, which is a mess. We don't like what we see, so we just distract ourselves, busy ourselves, so we don't have to look at our neurotic mind. And this was very much highlighted to me recently where they did a study. I think a number of you have heard about this study. I think it was done by Time magazine, actually. So they had a group of people. They had a room which was just white, completely white, chair in the middle. And the person, all they had to do was sit in the chair quietly for 15 minutes, only 15 minutes, and do nothing. There was nothing to see, nothing to do. 15 minutes. The only option they had was they gave each person a little device that could give themselves an electric shock, which was painful. Guess what? 65% of men preferred to shock themselves than sit quietly and do nothing for 15 minutes. One person shocked themselves 90 times in 15 minutes. Women were a bit better. Only 25% of women preferred to shock themselves than sit quietly and do nothing. Now, of course, of course, to simplify our life, we can just cut things forcibly out. I think this is not going to work because they'll come back. A better approach is to do the foundation practices that are recommended in most Buddhist traditions as the first practices. And that is to reflect on precious human life and death. If we reflect on precious human life and death, we will realize that we've got a precious opportunity here in this life. Not just a human life, but a human life full of opportunity, and it's not going to last forever. Generally, we only appreciate things when we've lost it or about to lose it. And so often what happens is people later in life, when they're approaching death, full of regrets. And there was an Australian nurse who was in the hospice movement, caring for terminally ill people, and over 20 or 30 years she asked people about their biggest regrets. The number one regret was regretting having worked too hard, spending all their life and time in work, and not spending time doing other meaningful things. So if we reflect on precious human life and death, I think what's going to happen is you're going to start to see that all these extra things that you fill up your day with are completely meaningless, and we're going to lose interest in them. In fact, recently I saw a lady on the internet who was terminally ill. She was pleading with people, please do not waste your life on meaningless activities. Because she saw she only had 6 months to live. She wasn't going to waste another moment on meaningless activities. We don't need to be terminally ill to want to make our life meaningful. We just need to reflect on precious human life and death, and we can have the same. Same happens sometimes. People who've had a near-death experience, they've directly seen death and come back. Often their lives are completely transformed. They know, they can see, they understand the preciousness of life, and they're full of enthusiasm often and want to make their life as meaningful as possible. So again, I think if we reflect on our precious human life and the fact that it's not going to last forever, I think you're going to find your life will suddenly, a lot of time and space will open up to meditate and to more meaningful activities. What to do? What practices? In all Buddhist traditions, there are 3 core practices. The foundation, of course, is ethics. Ethics means, of course, avoiding harmful, non-virtuous behaviour. On that basis, we engage in the concentration practice, the shamatha practice, to develop single-pointed concentration. And then on that basis, we engage in the wisdom practice, the vipassana practice. And here, of course, we talked about the wisdom practice of emptiness. But of course, this wisdom practice, we need to balance with the compassion wing of practice. Unfortunately, people coming into the spiritual path often gravitate to either wisdom or compassion, and then they sort of forget about the other one. You know, because in Buddhism, in all the traditions, how we get out of mental afflictions and suffering is wisdom. So then people go, okay, I need wisdom, let's do the vipassana practice. Full steam ahead. And then usually a couple of things happen. One is they go full steam ahead in vipassana, but they somehow forgot about the shamatha, the concentration practice. So then they put a lot of effort and nothing happens. And they wonder why, what's going on here? And the reason is we're not penetrating anything because our mind is distracted all over the place, half asleep. So we need the shamatha. But the other thing that happens if we just go full steam into vipassana, also the same thing that happens if we go full steam only into shamatha, is that we often become very self-absorbed we become very disconnected from the world and often become very insensitive to the sufferings of others. Not a very healthy state. You know, I sometimes see this in people who are really into the Vipassana practice, particularly in India, the sort of ones who do it the hardcore way, and they forget about the, you know, loving kindness, compassion, no time for that. And they're hardcore into this, and you see them walking down the road and they're like completely like in a world of their own. I mean, they're not agitated, but they're just completely like, just don't, nothing registers. They're just in their own little world. Not very healthy. But equally well, if we gravitate towards the compassion wing and forget about the wisdom, we're going to have difficulties. One, of course, is that our compassion can often become very biased, you know. I'll help these people because they're nice people, they deserve help, but those people, they're horrible, nasty people. I won't, no compassion there. In fact, I hope they suffer, they deserve to suffer. So our compassion gets very biased. And then also, often we have a lot of compassion, but we end up doing things that don't help, just create more suffering. So therefore, that is compassion without the wisdom of understanding what to do to help, how to help. And then also, often what can happen is, particularly people who are full of compassion and want to go out and make a difference in the world and heal the world and fix the world. We see this often in aid workers and social workers, full of enthusiasm, full of compassion. Out they go, 6 months later, compassion burnout, completely destroyed. Classic example of compassion without wisdom. The wisdom here, of course, is knowing the wisdom of what we can do to help, what we can't do to help, and the wisdom of knowing when to rest and look after ourselves. And then there's one more case that gets us into trouble, and I think all of us probably have experienced this many times, is that we try to help someone and then they take advantage of us. Classic case of compassion without wisdom. Because if we try to help someone and we allow someone to take advantage of us, this is not compassion, because we're in some ways encouraging them to behave badly. This is the opposite of compassion. Compassion is wishing them to be free of suffering and its causes, the mental afflictions. So if we're allowing them or contributing to them taking advantage of us, we're increasing their mental afflictions, not reducing. So therefore, the wisdom there is, if they're trying to take advantage of us, we are very firm about that. Of course, we're not getting angry at the person. That's not helpful. We're still having compassion for the person, but if they're trying to take advantage of us, we're very forceful about that. We would not tolerate that negative behavior. So therefore, we need wisdom and compassion together. And at the beginning level, at our level, we need to work on them individually, alternating them in practice. Because as I said earlier, when we get to the point of the wisdom practice coming to a direct realization of emptiness, that the natural expression of that is loving kindness and compassion. But to get to that point, we need to work on compassion individually. We can't just say, oh, the compassion will come when I realize emptiness, so I'll leave it till then. It won't happen. Because you'll never get to the direct realization of emptiness without working on compassion separately as a beginner. And so again, I think if we want the wisdom practice of emptiness, the compassion practice, all the other practices to be effective, the basis, of course, is the shamatha practice. We need to work on the shamatha practice. And all Buddhist traditions say that these are the three core areas of practice: ethics, concentration, wisdom. But if we look at all the various Buddhist traditions in the world today, what are they practicing? A lot of Theravada traditions, a lot of Vipassana. Tibetan Buddhism, bodhicitta, emptiness, deity yoga, all great. What happened to the shamatha? It seems to have got left out. And so then we put a lot of effort into these other practices, and we don't really get anywhere. So therefore, I think particularly in our modern society where our attention skills, our concentration skills are quite poor, we need to put a lot of effort into that. Because if we don't put effort into that, we can put a lot of effort into emptiness, bodhicitta, deity yoga, vipassana. We won't really get very far. So we need a combination there. We need to, of course, have shamatha as a basis, but then, of course, not just do shamatha or vipassana, but combine these practices. And then, of course, in terms of how to set up the day, just maybe a couple of points, and then that'll be enough from my side, is, again, a daily meditation practice is essential if we really want to progress. One of the difficulties with having a daily practice is just to develop the habit. So, very helpful to develop the habit is to meditate the same time every day. If we pick a time that works for us, and then we stick to that time, then it's much easier to develop the habit, because at every morning at this time is meditation time. And in meditation, we want to emphasize quality over quantity. So it's much better to meditate in a focused way for 20 minutes than try and sit there for an hour and just space out, get distracted, and so forth. So always emphasize quality over quantity. How long to meditate will depend on us as an individual, our capacity. One way to know if we're meditating too long is our enthusiasm to meditate the same at the end as it was at the beginning of the session. If it's dropping away, we're meditating too long. And very helpful when we meditate to set a timer. Because if we don't set a timer, usually one of two things happens. On days where things are very difficult, maybe we can't get into it, we're frustrated, distracted, half asleep, we try for 5 or 10 minutes, it's really difficult, then what we do, of course, is we give up. Not very good habit to get into. Because one of the things we definitely need in life in general, but in meditation as well, is perseverance. If every time things get a little bit difficult, we just stop, that's not a good habit to get into. If we've set a timer, even on days where things are difficult, we'll persevere. Very good. But on other days, if we don't set a timer, maybe things are going really well. And then what we do, of course, is we just keep meditating because things are going really well. And then we keep meditating until when? Until it's not going so well, and then we stop. And the thing we remember most about meditation is how it ended. And so if we're always ending on not a good note, we're going to start to associate meditation with not such good experiences. We're not going to want to meditate again. Whereas if we set a timer, the meditation is going well, we stop, that's what we remember, we'll be very enthusiastic to meditate the following day. So set a timer. And as I said, we need to bring whatever we meditate on into the day. So of course, if it's shamatha practice in the morning, we need to bring mindfulness into the day, work on that through the day. Here, in terms of the Heart Sutra, we talked about emptiness practice, and we bring that into the day by investigating appearances, not accepting appearances. And similarly with loving kindness and compassion, we meditate on that in the morning, we bring that into the day and work on that through the day. Also, of course, it's very good to end the day in a good way. If we have time and energy at the end of the day, very good if we can do another meditation at the end of the day. But if we don't, or we can't, I think we can do two things at the end of the day, which are very helpful. First is, at the end of the day, review our day. How did our day go? And then maybe pick one or two not so good things we did during the day, and then go through what's called in Buddhism purification, i.e. to have regret for doing that. Reaffirm our positive direction. Think of some sort of remedy for that and make a strong determination not to do it again the following day. But equally well, maybe even more important in our modern society, where we have this obsessive focus on the negative, we need to focus on the positive to have a balanced view of ourselves. So at the end of the day, review our day and then think of 1 or 2 or maybe 3 good things we did during the day, and then rejoice in that good behaviour and make a determination to continue that good behaviour the following day. In that way, we're going to reduce negative habits and increase positive habits. And then there's one more thing we can do before we go to sleep, and that is when we lie down in bed, we can lie on our back in what's called the Shavasana posture from yoga, flat on our back, hands to the side, and then do a little shamatha practice, a little mindfulness practice. And that is simply observe sensations in the body or the breathing and releasing any tension in the body. And if there's any thoughts coming up, releasing those thoughts. Because often at the end of the day, maybe tension in the body, mind is running wild from the day still, we try to sleep and it's hard to sleep. So if we do this practice, releasing any tension in the body, releasing any thoughts in the mind, we're relaxing. It's also a mindfulness exercise. We're improving our mindfulness. And we do that as long as we maintain some alertness. Once we start to get sleepy, we mentally note, my meditation is now finished. Move out of that posture into whatever posture we use for sleep. So this is a good way to finish the day. One more point, and then maybe a few questions to wrap up. Recommended reading for the Heart Sutra. There's a couple of books. There's one from His Holiness Dalai Lama called The Essence of the Heart Sutra. And I saw someone here with a book from Thich Nhat Hanh called Heart of Understanding. So this is a very good book, presenting this topic of emptiness in a very simple way. And then, of course, the main subject matter in this Heart Sutra was this wisdom of emptiness. And a very good book to start to think about and understand emptiness is How to See Yourself as You Really Are by His Holiness Dalai Lama, which I think has been translated into Hebrew. So this is a very good book to begin with. And particularly, a little bit in this 2 days, I mentioned how to approach this investigation of me, the person. You know, to get a clear picture of how we see ourselves existing, and then to do this search, is it the same or different body and mind? So this is very clearly laid out in this book from His Holiness Dalai Lama, step by step. So this is very, very helpful. So those are a couple of books that I'd recommend. Also, if you want to, not often when I teach this sometimes over a longer time. And so I've got a website. glensvensson.org, where I have a number of different courses and retreats that I've run, the audio. So whatever you find on that website, help yourself. There's a lot of materials and charts and things there as well. So anything you find there, help yourself. And as I mentioned, next year, beginning next year in March, I'll be coming to Israel and leading a 10-day shamatha retreat, mainly a 10-day shamatha retreat. And so I'm sure Leora will give you information about that if she hasn't already. And that's all I wanted to cover. So if there's any last questions before we sort of wrap up today.
First of all, thank you. And
Sure.
The thing you said in the last 2 days that I connected with the most and got the close to maybe understanding a tiny little bit of emptiness was when you spoke today about I have anger. I'm not angry. I have anger. So I was thinking about that over the break, and then I tried to use it with I lost the thread. And you mentioned our society, we have a lot of negativity, so I'm sure many people have the thought of I'm a failure or I am a success. So how
I mean, when you say I'm a failure, it's because maybe it's some sort of behaviors or habits that you have done or have not done. So then just focus on that. Rather than I am a failure, you can say I have a habit of not doing this, or I have a habit of doing that, or I have a habit, or I'm not very good at doing that, or something. So use that sort of way of speaking language, because then we can still feel good about ourselves, but at the same time we can strive to correct any faults or negative behaviour that we might have.
Okay.
So as soon as we use the word I am, we're in trouble.
Right.
Because this is really, when we talked about emptiness, you know, we said that, like pen is, we're applying the label pen to the basis, and so similarly, in a similar way, you know, we can say that I have something, whereas when you say I am, you are sticking them together. Like this is the pen, like I am angry is false. It's a false perspective. Oh, non-duality?
Yes.
Right.
And you said it's not one.
So emptiness is a non-dualistic experience. So non-duality, it means not two.
Yes. And today you mentioned the term oneness.
Huh?
Today you mentioned the term oneness.
Oneness.
Yes. So
Yeah.
Advaita, one, and oneness.
Yeah, so oneness is, I think, a sense of non-duality. So, again, technically, the right thing to say is not two, not dual, non-dual. So what we can say, what we can correctly say, is that we are all one nature. We're all the same nature of emptiness, but we can't say we're one. Today what I was using was an example of people who often say, I had a oneness experience with nature. But again, technically that can be a bit misleading. But when people say that, they mean that they had an experience where there was no sense of separate me and separate nature. Because really, when we say things are one means identical. So the old example of big and small is, if big and small are one, it would mean they're identical. But they're not identical, so they're not one, they're not two, meaning not big and small. So this is not two, non-dual. But we can't say they're one. One means this, they're identical, and they're not identical. They're not the same.
So everything is standing relatively to the other thing.
Yeah, so another way we can say this, I'll just add a bit, is things are neither the same nor different. Different means big and small. Same is another word for one. It's like that. So big and small are neither same nor different. That's what it means.
Do you have any graphic image to try to describe?
Again, we are using words to describe something beyond words, beyond conception.